What is going on, everybody? It is Hunter with LS Lures, and welcome back to Tackle Talk Wednesday. I know this normally happens on Tuesdays. I was gone all last week. We're playing catch up this week, but today we're going to be talking about some of the worst jig mistakes you can make, how to fix them, what to do, and how to save yourself a ton of headache when you're just getting into jig fishing, or if you're having some issues right now, you've been doing it a little while. We're going to break down some of the most common mistakes, some of the things I see with a lot of guys, some of the conversations I have with folks, and really try and help you guys become the best jig fisherman possible. For those of you who are new to the channel, LS Lures is a small jig company. It's just me running it. We make super badass, hand-tied, hand-painted, all the good stuff and things jigs. Check them out on our website. The link's below there. But everything is really, really high quality. We use premium hooks there, make the best stuff we absolutely can because, as you all know, big box brand stuff kind of sucks sometimes, and we're absolutely not going to put up with that. But in today's video, we're going to really break some things down, help you guys become the best jig fisherman possible. So make sure you like and subscribe. Let me know what you want to see below. If you guys have any questions at any point in time, drop a comment below because those are the things that we like. Those are the things that I can address in future videos or just fix in the comments there. So if you guys have any questions at any point, make sure you comment below, like and subscribe, and let's jump into it. For those of you who've been here before, you know the drill. It's a new week, which means we've got a new sale. This week on our website, all of our gaff swim jigs, which are a really badass little swim jig there. We run a really big 4-aught EWG hook in them there. We call it the gaff because it sticks them and it's hard for them to come off there. It's a really sweet little jig, and we are doing 20% off all of them this week. Today's Wednesday when the video is dropping. This sale is live today, Wednesday, all the way through Friday at midnight. So make sure you stock up on these. They're 20% off, which puts them at like $4.79. That cuts off a little over $1 and some change there for you guys. We're trying to hook you guys up, give you the best tackle possible for a great price there. So make sure you jump on these. The link is down below. And if you guys want to make sure you don't miss out on anything, I've also got the link to our mailing list down below. Go ahead and subscribe to that. We send out a weekly email there with some updates on our YouTube videos, updates on sales, some different customs we're coming out with, all the information, a bunch of tips and tricks, all the good stuff and things. So make sure you subscribe to that below too, and check out these jigs on our website. Alrighty boys, now that we're done with the intro, we've talked about our badass sale going on right now on our gaff swim jigs. Links below. Load up on some while they're still here. We've been selling a lot already this morning. But we're going to be talking about, honestly, the most crucial part of any jig fisherman's arsenal, and that's going to be the rod, the reel, and the line, and the mistakes I see people making with it. You know, I have a lot of conversations with guys, whether it be on social media, on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, talking on the phone, text messages, talking in person, whatever it may be. And the most common thing I see guys saying is, I can't land fish, I have too many pull off, I'm missing them, I'm breaking them off. You know, there's a million different things that go into having the right combination. And what I'm seeing most guys that have issues do is they're just simply throwing a setup that's too light, okay? Jigs have a brush guard on them. That brush guard keeps them from getting snagged, which is an absolute thing of beauty. But one downfall that brush guard has to it there is that it also makes it substantially harder to hook fish because you have to have a setup that is heavy enough to get that brush guard to collapse all the way down, exposing that hook and driving that hook into their mouth. Jig hooks are also typically, traditionally at least, a lot heavier than other hooks on the market. You know, it's not like a crankbait, it's not like a spinnerbait, it's not like anything like that where, you know, you can just kind of pull into them and get that fish hooked and reel it in. And, you know, it's nice to have a spongy rod at that point because when they're fighting, it keeps those really light wire hooks pinned in there. With a jig, you want a rod that is heavy enough to get that brush guard to collapse down, drive that big heavy wire hook through their skull, and then pull them out of whatever cover, whether there's cover, no cover, grass, weeds, docks, rocks, whatever it may be. You want them out of that cover and heading towards you as soon as possible. And what I see a lot of guys doing is they're just not throwing a setup that is heavy enough to do that, you know? So if you're throwing a jig on a rod that's a medium, we're talking about bait casters. If you're throwing it on a spinning rod, throw a lighter jig, okay? Throw some kind of finesse jig, throw something with a light wire hook on it, throw something that has a very thin brush guard on it, because you're just gonna have issues no matter what you do throwing a full-size bass jig with a big brush guard on a spinning rod. And if you're doing it, make sure you run braid or some kind of line that has less stretch so you can make sure you get that brush guard collapse down and make sure you crack the absolute piss out of them, because again, you're gonna lose a lot more fish just because traditionally typically spinning rods do not have the same amount of power to drive that hook home and get those fish landed on that. So I prefer to throw these on a bait caster. I'm not saying you have to, but for the sake of this video and talking about all the different jigs we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about bait casters. We're going to be talking about the rods, the reels, and the lines for those. That way you guys don't go out and apply this to a spinning rod and it's going to make your life an absolute living hell because the line's going to be too heavy and you're just going to have a bad time there. But talking about rods, if you guys are throwing a medium action bait caster or you're throwing a glass rod, you are setting yourself up for failure. Medium actions and glass rods both of any power are most of the time going to be too soft to get a good hook set in those fish, to keep those fish pinned, and to really drive that hook home. Whether you're using braid or not, it just isn't a really good combination, and you're going to lose a lot more fish in cover because you simply do not have the power to get that fish's head turned up and heading towards you if they're in a lay down, if they're in a brush pile, wherever they're at, because that rod is just not stiff enough to really lay the wood of those fish and get them out of that stuff. So if you're going to be fishing a jig, the easiest way to avoid absolute catastrophic failure and frustration and ripping your hair out and never want to throw them again, the first step is going to be throwing a rod that's a medium heavy or a heavy action. Which one you choose is completely up to you. You can do pretty much whatever you want with both. If you're fishing heavier cover or heavier line or heavier jigs, or you're fishing deeper and further or wherever, throw a heavy rod, okay? You're gonna have more power. If you're worried whatsoever that that fish is gonna get you buried, that you're not gonna be able to get it out, or you're worried about them, you know, if you're not getting a good enough hook set with a medium heavy, if you're making really long casts and fishing out a little bit deeper, switch to heavy action rod. If you're throwing a lighter weight jig, shallower, closer to you, around lighter cover, great, throw a medium heavy. You know, if you're throwing a jig that doesn't have a super heavy hook on it, throw a medium heavy. Now, if you're throwing something that's got an absolute beefcake of a hook on it, like some of our Midwest flipping jigs here that have a 2x strong flipping hook on the back, it might not be a bad idea to throw that jig on a heavy there just because you want to make sure you get that good penetration. But whatever you do, just make sure that you're throwing your jigs on a medium heavy or a heavy action rod, because at the end of the day, you're going to land way more fish if you're able to get this brush guard to collapse down and get that hook to penetrate up into their mouth all the way, okay? I want this jig as far in past the barb stuck into their face as I can. And again, if I'm fishing around any sort of cover and I'm not able to turn that fish, no matter how big it is, if I can't turn that fish and get some kind of leverage on it to get it out away from that cover, I'm automatically at a disadvantage because that fish is going to go, it's going to bury itself, and its odds of coming off just went up exponentially because now I have to go in and try and get it. There's more odds I'm going to throw slack in my line. It just is not a good combination. It's not a good setup for success. And if you guys have been fishing a jig, whether you're new, old, or whatever, you know that any kind of bottom bait, those fish are able to pick up and move in whatever direction they want with it. It's not like a crankbait where I'm reeling it in and they eat it and I automatically hook them and I just keep reeling and they're on. A jig, if I'm not paying attention, that fish can eat it, swim 5 feet towards me, 5 feet to the left, 5 feet to the right, 5 feet wherever he wants, right? Sometimes before I notice there's a bite if I'm not paying attention. The goal is to be paying attention, but either way, sometimes they can swim pretty damn fast after they eat it. And if you don't have a rod that's heavy enough to drive that hook home when you've got some slack in the line, you're also going to lose a lot more fish. You're not going to land as many. So having a rod that can pick up slack really quick, drive that hook home no matter where they're at, is going to put you at an automatic advantage over that fish and land you a lot more. So buy a medium heavy or a heavy, something between 7 foot and 7'6". Shorter rods are going to give you better casting accuracy in closer quarters. Longer rods are going to give you a little bit more power and a little bit better casting distance. The choice is yours. Get some different rods in your hands. Go to your local tackle shop. Put some of them in your hands. See what you like. A medium heavy or a heavy, fast action, extra fast, either or, find what you like. But just please God, stop throwing jigs on rods that are too light and you'll be a lot happier at the end of the day. The next thing that I see guys struggling with is they're throwing their jigs on a reel that is simply too slow. Like I just talked about, when that jig is sitting on the bottom and big old Billy, the bucket mouth bass, comes over and picks that sucker up and is like, I gotta get the heck out of here. I just scored a meal, and he's running one direction. If you set the hook, if you've got the perfect rod, if you've got the perfect line and everything, it doesn't matter if everything and the atmospheric pressure is perfect and all the stars align. If you have a reel that's too slow, that fish is gonna beat you. There's gonna get to be some slack in your line and you're gonna lose a lot of fish. So when you're picking out a reel to fish jigs on, try and get something that's over a 7 gear ratio, okay? 7 to 1, 7 to 4, whatever it may be, just get something that's over a 7, okay? Jump up to an 8, jump up to a 9 if you have to, but if you have a reel that's too slow, whether that be a 5 or a 6, you can get away with a 6, it's just not ideal because it does not pick up line as quick as a 7 plus does, okay? Because when that fish eats it and he runs towards you and you set the hook and you barely get it in there and he's running right at you, if you can't catch up to him, there's going to be slack in your line, that jig's going to come out, and you're going to be really, really sad for the rest of the day because he beat you, and the next 5 you hook into beat you if they're all running at you. Now, some places they don't do that, and some places that's all they do. So the biggest thing here to prevent frustration is to go with a reel that's got a pretty heavy drag on it and is at least 7 something. Now, if you're looking at it and you're like, well, Hunter just said get the fastest reel possible. I'm not saying that. I'm saying 7 is the best all around. You can jump up to an 8 or a 9. One thing to consider when you're looking at this is, okay, I just got a whatever reel that's a 9 to 1 gear ratio and it picks up a ton of line every time I turn that reel. Is that the most optimal option if you're slow dragging jigs on the bottom or you're swimming a jig there? Where you want to take it nice and easy, you want it to be comfortable? Absolutely not, because if I want to slow drag and every time I turn my handle that jig moves forward 2 feet, that's pretty tough to really you're going to have to be a lot more mentally aware when you're doing that, because every time you turn that handle, that jig is moving substantially farther than it would be with the 7 gear ratio reel, right? And if I'm swimming a jig and I cast out there, your normal swim jig retrieve all of a sudden is super slow because that reel's picking up so much more line. So if you reel it like you're normally going to reel it, that jig is flying. You're not going to get as many bites because it's simply moving too fast. So if you want to go with an 8 or a 9, keep it to a flipping reel, keep it something where it's pretty close quarters, where I'm going to pitch out there, I'm going to shake it, and I might hop it twice, and then I want it back to the boat. An 8 or a 9 gear ratio reel is perfect for that because it's close quarters, it's quick, it's really quick. It's that combat that's right next to the boat where they're typically going to run at you and you don't have very much time to keep up. So an 8 or 9 gear ratio reel is perfect for short flipping. It's great for short casts, stuff like that, where you're pitching out there, you're not moving it a whole lot and you're reeling it back to the boat. It's going to make you a lot more efficient on the water. You're going to have a lot less heartache. But if you're doing anything dragging or swimming a jig or anything like that, a 7 something gear ratio reel is going to be your absolute best friend. So if you do that and you get the right power rod, whether it's a medium heavy or a heavy, and you get some kind of reel over a 7 gear ratio, you're on your way to having a really great jig setup. I'm not here to pitch product. I'm not telling you what kind of rods you have to buy. You buy whatever's in your budget. If you can afford a really nice rod, you're going to be super happy, because the nicer the rod you go, more often than not, the more sensitive they're going to be, the lighter weight they're going to be, the less fatigue you're going to have when you're out there flipping and pitching all day. Just going to make your experience a lot better. If you can't afford anything more than, $100, $80 on a rod, go for it. Just make sure you've got something that's heavy enough to get that hook set, and a reel that's quick enough to pick up that line for you, and you're gonna have a lot less heartache there. Most of your combos that you see, your Cabela's, your Bass Pro, your Shields, whatever it may be, your 7-foot medium heavies with a 7 gear ratio reel are a perfect way to start. They'll work good enough, and then as you get some more money in your pocket, you can always upgrade to a different setup, start piecing something together that you like. I've ran a bunch of different brands. I'm super happy with a bunch of stuff. You find what works best for you. Last but not least, when we're on this topic of the perfect setup and what you need, the last thing I see a lot of guys doing that causes a ton of frustration is they're throwing line that is absolutely unacceptable. It's too light. It's not going to work. You're going to break a lot of fish off. It's got too much stretch. You're just going to absolutely have a not really good time if you go out and you're throwing the wrong line, because you could have the perfect rod and the perfect reel, but if your line's too light, you're going to break those suckers off. You're going to lose the big ones. You're going to have a lot more issues than you are successes, and you're just not going to have a very fun time fishing a jig. So when I'm fishing a jig, there's a couple different brands, or there's a couple different line options you can go with. I'm going to talk about 3 right now. There's monofilament, there's braid, and there's fluorocarbon. We're going to talk about mono and fluoro together in the first one. Biggest difference is fluorocarbon sinks, mono floats. They both have great abrasion resistance, and fluorocarbon is going to be more translucent than monofilament is, because monofilament reflects light a lot more, where fluorocarbon does not, okay? I prefer fluorocarbon. If you're just looking for one line to glue in your hand, stick with, find something that works good, go with fluorocarbon. It's also got a lot less stretch than mono, and if you're gonna fish mono, try and run it with a heavy action rod and run at least 17 or 20 pound. I don't want to get into mono a whole lot because I don't want you guys running it. There's a lot of guys that do. It will catch fish. I've just had a lot of issues losing fish and having that line stretch if I'm making further casts. So if you're going to go with mono, if you're going to pick mono, if you want mono because it's a cheap, easy option, go with 17 or 20 pound test, run it on a heavy action rod, and keep your casts pretty short if you can, because you're going to have a lot less stretch and a lot less issues. Talking about fluorocarbon, I used to sell at Shields. I sold line every single day. I spooled it onto guys' reels. I talked to them all the time. I sold a lot of jig setups and stuff like that. And the biggest argument, the biggest pushback I got when I was there was, I don't need 20 pound line because I'm not going to catch 20 pound fish. Or I don't need 15 pound line because I'm not going to catch 15 pound fish. And it's not about that, okay? The biggest thing, guys, when we're talking about upsizing your line so that you go out, you have a successful trip, you're not super angry at the end of the day, you don't lose anything there, is having a line that's got very little stretch to it and it's going to be abrasion resistant enough to where I can rub it up against a dock post or a rock or a log or do whatever, or that fish could wrap me up 5 times and I could go in there and get them and not worry about that line breaking, about that fish pulling, or about me setting the hook like a Neanderthal and my line exploding because it's simply not heavy enough, okay? Always keep your jig line with fluorocarbon somewhere between 15 and 20 pound test. You can go heavier if you want, if you're around some really nasty stuff, and you can go lighter if you're fishing a crazy little tiny finesse jig or something like that in gin clear water. You can get away with 12 if you have to, but I never ever throw 12 because 15 is a better option. It still gets bit and I feel a lot more comfortable throwing it just because it's just better most of the time. So I would avoid anything under 15 pound test unless you're in open water with nothing, no sort of sharp anything, and you've got a light brush guard and a light wire hook there. So 15 to 20 pound test. Typically for most jigs that I'm throwing, I'll run 17 or 20. The only time I really run 15 is again around really pressured fish, around more open water scenarios, or if I'm in gin clear water there and the bite's pretty tough, I'll downsize to 15. 17 is a really good do-all there. 20 is what I use almost exclusively for all my flipping setups. So if I'm around some nasty cover, 20 is going to be your best friend. And if I'm swimming a jig or I'm throwing, a 1/4 ounce jig or 3/8 ounce jig around some lighter stuff, 17 works just fine too. But just make sure that you're running heavy line, because that way you can set the hook really hard and get that brush guard to collapse down and not worry about my line stretching, because again, the lighter your line is, the more stretch it's going to have, the less likely that brush guard is to collapse down the way it's supposed to, and you're just going to be a really sad camper there. So get something that's heavy, and that way you can rip them out of the brush piles, cast where you need to, put a jig where a jig is meant to be, and not worry whatsoever about, well, if I hook one, I'm in trouble. No, if I hook one, he's coming out. He's going in the boat, The last one to talk about, guys, is braid. Braid's a super easy one. Braid lasts a long time. Braid doesn't have any memory. If you're gonna throw braid straight, try and keep it in dirtier water around vegetation. Braid cuts through vegetation a lot better than mono and fluoro does, and it's also great in dirty water because braid is very visible, and in dirty water they can't see as well, so you can get away with running it straight there. If you're gonna throw braid in clean water, try and run a leader. Again, like I said, between 15 and 20 pound test. Run a couple feet, run 2 feet, run 12 inches if you have to, if that's what you want. But some kind of leader is going to help you get more bites in cleaner water just because it separates that braid from the jig. These fish are getting smart. They get hooked every day. There's a lot more pressure. It's a lot easier for the average angler to become much better via YouTube and the internet now. So running fluorocarbon, since it's clear, will get you more bites than running straight braid, depending on where you're fishing at. If you're fishing somewhere where they're all dumb and they don't care and they don't get caught, you're the only guy that fishes it, run straight braid. I don't care, you do whatever. If it works for you, keep doing it. But if you want to get more bites and you want to capitalize on some of those more pressured fish, run braid to a leader. Look at any of Seth Fighter stuff, he does it. Run the Alberto knot or the FG knot, and you guys are going to be happy campers there. But when you're running braid, this is the same concept. Run at least 30 pound test, because braid's diameter is so much smaller that if you run 10 pound test, it's equivalent to 2 pound mono. And when you set the hook really hard, that line will dig itself into your spool, and the next 5 casts or whatever, you're going to be sitting there and it's going to be catching, and you're going to have to pull all your line out, reset it, do whatever you want. It's just simply too thin. 30 pound is kind of the bare minimum there, to where it's thick enough it doesn't dig into itself super bad. Most of the time I run 30 to 40 pound. I don't see a need on most jigs to run anything over 50 or 65 there. In my opinion, those are frogging lines. But if you're running a jig on a heavy or a medium heavy rod with braid, run at least 30 or 40 pound and try and get a fluorocarbon leader on there if you can. You'll be a lot happier. But whatever you do, please God, do it for me, do it for yourself, do it for your future generations of your family, you know. Run heavy enough line that you can catch those fish, get them in the boat, and it doesn't matter if you're not around that heavy a cover and you're never gonna catch a fish that's 15 to 20 pounds. Just make sure that you're running line heavy enough to handle whatever you're getting into. All right, so now that you've got the perfect rod, reel, line, everything you need to hook those fish and put them in the boat, the next thing that I hear a lot of guys talk about is, I don't know what jig to throw. And if you look at any online retailer, or even our website, there is a lot of different options, okay? There's a bunch of different head shapes, there's a bunch of different sizes, there's a billion different colors and stuff like that. So for the next part of this video, we're gonna make things super simple, and we're just gonna help you guys find the right jig to get things kicked off with, that you can go out, you can fish wherever. It'll work for pretty much anything there, because there's so many different options, and that's great once you get your feet wet and start to figure things out. But when you guys are just getting into this, or if you're not super confident with a jig yet, start simple, find a jig that'll do it all, glue it in your hand, and just go fishing, and you're gonna get a lot better than you would if you had 15 different head styles and you're trying to master each one at the same time. It's just too much to do, okay? A jig's a jig. They all pretty much perform pretty dang similarly. It's just some of them are better at certain actions or certain jobs than others. And so we'll talk about that really quick, but then we're gonna get into making things easy and catching you guys more fish. So before we get into the nitty gritty of just finding one and a couple different little hacks that'll make you guys better jig fishermen, there's a couple different big categories of jigs here. We're gonna break those down really quick. The first one and the most versatile is going to be a flipping jig. Flipping jigs typically have some kind of keeled head there. This allows them to come through cover really well, whether that's wood, rock, brush, grass, whatever it may be. These jigs are the most versatile for absolutely everything. You can swim them, you can drag them, you can skip them, you can dead stick them, you can do whatever you want, right? Because this head style is super versatile and it will do anything anywhere in the country at pretty much any depth there. But one thing that characterizes flipping jigs is they typically have a little bit heavier hook, and they've got typically a little bit heavier brush guard there as well, so they can come through cover really well. But if you're looking for one really well-rounded jig to do everything, which we'll talk about more, a flipping jig is going to be the best place to start. The next head style is going to be some kind of swim jig. This is our gaff swim jigs. These are the ones that are 20% off right now. But a swim jig is effective in a lot of different places, but what they're designed for is swimming. It's supposed to be like constantly moving there. It mimics a lot of different types of bait fish depending on what color you have, but that pointed head is designed to come through vegetation very well. So it's a lot more slender, it doesn't catch up on things. So if you've got a lot of grass, a lot of vegetation in your area, whether you're down south or fishing a pond or whatever it is, if there's a lot of grass and vegetation, you might not have to mess around with these other jigs. Just get you a swim jig, slow roll this around, like reel it super fast. There's not really a wrong way to fish these, right? As long as they stay moving and you pair the right trailer off the back of them, which we've got in a couple different videos, check out on our channel, go search around. But a swim jig is a really great option around vegetation, swimming around docks, swimming in areas that have a lot of bait fish when those fish are really active. And they're also really good when the wind's blowing because you don't have to worry about feeling a bottom bite. You can just cover bank and keep moving and find those active fish there. So a swim jig typically has a point in your head and it's great for covering water and fishing around vegetation. The next one on the list is a football jig. Football jig has that football shaped head there. And what that does is it basically keeps that jig from snagging around rock and gravel. It keeps it really centered on the bottom. It does a good job staying down. It doesn't rise up at all. This is probably the least versatile of all the jigs. And there's going to be a couple people that disagree with me on that. But the main thing to use a football jig for is if you've got some kind of hard spot, some kind of offshore structure, if you're dragging flat, whatever it may be. Football jig is going to be your guy because they can come in really heavy sizes. There's a lot of different options there. But the thing that they are best at is fishing around rock, fishing around hard bottom, dragging. They're not super good around vegetation. flipping it or doing anything like that. They don't really swim that well. They might not skip the best, depending on how you're running it or whatever. But just to keep things simple for the sake of this video, if you're dragging stuff off deep or you're dragging rock around the banks and stuff, a football jig might be your guy, but it is not what I would recommend if you're just getting your feet wet in jig fishing. And last but not least, guys, the last thing we're going to talk about, there's obviously a bunch of different options in the world. We're just going over some of the ones that we sell. And the last one we're going to talk about is a finesse style jig. So we've got a little ball head. These jigs are great at a lot of things. They're not the best at anything, but you can flip them around, you can bring them in wood, you can skip them, drag them, hop them. They come through rock fine. They're a really good versatile option, but the thing that characterizes a finesse jig is going to be that skirt cut on the front. It is not nearly as full. It's about half the size as a standard jig cut there. And what that does is it makes it a lot smaller profile. It gets a lot more bites, and it's really good when the bite gets tough. Those fish are finicky. Or if you're fishing for smaller fish and you're just trying to get bites, a finesse jig is going to be your guy. Throw a little trailer on there. It works from coast to coast, shallow to deep. But a finesse jig is a really good way to just get bites wherever and do a lot of different things with it because of that ball head shape. As I said when we got into this section, guys, one thing that I hear a lot of guys struggling with, and a huge mistake that a lot of folks deal with when they're just getting into jig fishing or they're learning it or they're trying to learn it, is they buy too many jigs in too many different styles and they've got too many options and whatnot, and they just overcomplicate the ever-living crap out of it, okay? Like I just said, each of these jigs has its own purpose and they each have their specialty, but one thing that's gonna make your life a lot easier when you're getting into it and learning it is just picking a jig that'll do a little bit of everything. And that jig is our Midwest flipping jig, okay? It's that flipping jig I just showed you. And like I said, when we kind of broke it down a little bit, this jig can drag, it can hop, it can skip, you can swim it really well. I swim these all the time. It comes through grass well. It's great around docks and wood and rock and you name it. So if you're looking for a jig or if you're trying to build confidence, don't buy a crap ton of head designs, right? Because every one that you try in the wrong area is just gonna make things a little bit harder for you. It's gonna kind of put you down on yourself, right? Because if I'm trying a football jig and I'm throwing a football jig in the complete wrong areas, right? I'm not gonna have a ton of confidence with that. And that's not just football jigs, that's jigs in general, right? Because if you throw the wrong jig in every single spot, and you don't really get that good perfect rotation in, you're just gonna have a bad time and you're gonna wanna throw something else. So throwing a jig like our Midwest flipping jig, where I can go over to a section of riprap or rock, and I can drag it and get bit, or I can swim it along the rock and I can get bit, and then I can go down the bank and I can flip a lay down and get bit with it, and then I can go off the bank and throw it in 20 feet of water on a brush pile and get bit, and then I can flip standing timber, and then I can go flip a grass line, and I can swim the grass line with it. Having a jig that you can do absolutely everything is essential when you're just getting kicked off. I wish somebody would have told me this in the beginning when I was just starting off, because I did what everybody does, and I bought a bunch of football jigs that I didn't need for the area I was in, and I bought a bunch of swim jigs and finesse jigs and this and that, and this size and that size. And the biggest thing for you guys that are just getting into it, get a jig that will do it all and get it in a lightweight. And by lightweight, I mean 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce. The reason being, lightweight jigs simply get more bites, okay? They don't move as fast, they don't get as many snags, they're a lot better meal for smaller fish. So if you guys are just trying to build confidence, don't go throw a 5/8 ounce jig everywhere, because the amount of fish in that smaller size class that you're gonna catch on it might not be as many. If I go throw a 1/4 ounce down that bank, I might be able to catch 10 or 15, where with a 5/8 ounce, I'm gonna catch 2, you know? So to keep this simple and to prevent me from rambling absolutely too much, because I can go on and on and on about this forever, if you're looking for a jig to start off with, find some kind of flipping jig in a 1/4 or 3/8 ounce. It's gonna snag less, it's gonna enter the water quieter, it's gonna get a lot more of those all-around bites, whether it's small, big, everything in between there. And you're gonna have a lot more enjoyable experience and build a lot better confidence quicker with the jig that's gonna get more bites. So be sure you check out our Midwest flipping jigs. I've got them linked below. These things are kick-ass. We've got a bunch of them in stock right now. They're definitely our top seller, but this jig can hop, swim, skip, drag, flip, do whatever you want. Wherever you're at in the country, we've got a bunch of awesome colors, which we're gonna be talking about next. And it just gets bit. So a 1/4 ounce, 3/8 of an ounce, and you guys are gonna have a lot better time on the water, learning a jig, and stop wasting your time with big bulky suckers that get a lot less bites, snag a lot more, and make you want to rip your hair out sometimes. Those you can figure out later, but just starting off, building confidence, go with one of these. All right, like I said, the next thing we're gonna be talking about is jig color. I'm not gonna show you 50 million colors on here. I'm not gonna say each one's got a specific purpose. They're kind of like shoes. They all have their own scenario that they're good for. Some of them will work for everything. Some of them will only work for one thing. But what I do wanna say in this, I'm gonna make things super simple. If you guys are just trying to figure out what jig you want, one of the biggest mistakes I see is guys throwing the completely wrong color and the wrong water clarity. Fish are getting smart. They're getting really smart. And if you make mistakes like that, sometimes you're just not going to get bit at all when they would munch any other color of jig. So the first thing I want to say is in clean water, cleaner water, you know, throw a more natural bait. If those fish can see it really well, throw something that's green pumpkin, throw something that's watermelon, something that looks green or brown or whatever that matches the forage in that lake, okay? And if you don't know what kind of forage is in there, just try and match your jig to the bottom content. So if it's really green grass and it's, you know, sandy and nice, throw a really translucent green jig, okay? It's gonna match that bottom content. It's also gonna match all the prey that also looks like that because they don't wanna get eaten. Those fish are used to finding them. Your jig is not that good at hiding. They're gonna find it, they're gonna eat it. If you're on really dark clay bottom, throw a brown jig, okay? That's what all the crawdads look like. That's oftentimes what the bait looks like that's living down there. That's what those bass are used to looking for. So if you throw a brown jig on bottom that's brown, you're just gonna get a lot more bites, okay? Now, in dirty water, this is when you wanna throw your dark colors or your really bright colors, because bright colors stand out better and dark colors silhouette better. So if the water's really muddy and murky, don't throw something that's really light brown because it's gonna be a lot harder for them to see it. Not saying you can't get bites, but if the water's dirty and the visibility is not very good, go ahead and throw your black and blues, your black and purples. We've got a million different options on our website, so jump down and check those out. But when the water's dirty, a darker jig is gonna silhouette better, it's gonna show up better, and those fish are just going to find it a lot easier, and you're gonna get more bites on it, plain and simple. If you're in dirty water too, a bright color can work really well because again, it stands out. It's easy to see. Those fish don't have any issues locking in on it. Now, in terms of shad colors, you know, if you're like, well, I think they're eating shad, in cleaner water, throw a more translucent shad color. You know, we've got a color called Pacifier. That's a really great one. We've got Chrome Dome. We've got a couple different colors that are really good in clear water. If the water's a little bit dingier, sometimes a bright white, a plain white, a white chartreuse is a really great option there. So match your colors to the water clarity. If it's really clean, throw something that's super natural and looks like all the bait fish that they're feeding on. If it's really dirty, throw something a little bit more obnoxious. But what I see a lot of guys doing is they take really natural jigs and they fish them in the mud and they don't get a lot of bites. And then they go into clear water and they throw something that's really unnatural, like a black and blue or a straight white, and they don't get very many bites. So I'm not saying again that you can't go out and throw those and get bit. And every now and then there's a time and place where you can throw black and blue in jet clean water, and it's so different because they don't see it, because nobody does it, that you get a lot of bites on it. But if you just want to get more bites in general all around and catch those pressured fish, throw really natural jigs in clean water, throw your darker, your brighter jigs in dirty water. The cleaner it is, the more translucent you want to be, and anything in between, your green pumpkins, your browns are going to work just fine there, guys. But try and match your jigs to the time of year, try and match the forage that they're keying in on, and if you don't know, like I said, just try and match that jig skirt to the bottom and the surrounding environment, and you're gonna get a lot more bites there. It's plain and simple, it's really easy. Stop making this stupid mistake that just sometimes sucks. It doesn't get you a lot of bites, and you guys will be a lot better off for it. All right, boys. I hope you guys are sticking with me. I hope you guys have learned a couple things. I'm trying to make this as clean cut as possible. I don't want to ramble absolutely too much in this video. I just want to help you guys get some confidence if you're struggling catching fish on a jig, rule out some of those easy mistakes, and give you some of that buildup so that you can go out and catch fish today on it and not have any worries about, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, right? So if you've made it this far, again, make sure you like and subscribe. But the next thing we're going to be talking about and simplifying for you guys is picking the right jig trailer. It's another one that I hate to see all the time. You know, you see it online, you see it on all sorts of different videos, and it's just that guys are throwing absolutely wild jig trailers that you don't have to, you know. I feel like a lot of jig trailers actually reduce the amount of bites you get. There's a bunch that work, there's an infinite amount that work really, but there's a lot that just don't make any sense to throw on there. So for those of you who are throwing some absolutely crazy huge stuff on the back of your jig, you don't have to. And I'm gonna make this really simple. I'm gonna break this down. I keep my jig trailers pretty simple. And that is, I like some kind of kicking grub trailer, something that's got a little bit of action. You know, this is a very broad category. This could be a striking rage craw. This could be a menace grub. This one right here is a Revive Baco greasy grub. It's got a really subtle little kick on the back. Just enough to get some action to draw those fish in. It fits really well on the back of the jig. You know, a Crush City, cleanup craw, you know, whatever it is. You pick your favorite brand of craw that you like to Texas rig or flip around, take it, put it on the back of your jig. But the biggest mistake I see guys making is that they leave the entire trailer on the back of that. And I've seen some wild one. I've seen pictures of full-size brush hogs and all sorts of crazy stuff, which again, this isn't a video to tell you that that's absolutely not going to work. I've seen crazier things happen, but the biggest thing here is to get you guys confidence. And if you don't know where to start, get some kind of tiny kicking trailer, some kind of craw profile, and this will work on the back of a swim jig, it'll work on the back of a flipping jig, football jig, whatever. It'll work on them all, okay? All year round. You don't have to overcomplicate it. A lot of videos are like, you have to throw a chunk now and you have to do this now, and that's great, but when you're just trying to build confidence, just get something that you know will work. Quit playing around with a million different styles. Get something that's got a little bit of action on the back, fits on the back of the jig well, it matches that profile really good. You guys are gonna be just fine. So, with this, for the sake of this video, we're gonna show you exactly how I would rig this trailer on here and what mistakes a lot of people make. Now, the first one that I'm gonna say, most pictures of jigs that I see guys post, they've got a full-size trailer on the back with a full jig and a full skirt and a full brush guard, everything. Nothing's been touched, okay? So this jig goes on the back like so, everything's huge. This is all of a sudden a really big profile. Now, if you're just going for really big bites, this is fine. This is just fine. If all you want to do is flip heavy cover and go after big fat mamas, great, leave it as is. If you guys are just trying to build some confidence and want to get a lot more bites, I'm gonna show you a couple little tricks with your trailers and your jigs to achieve that, okay? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my trailer here, I'm gonna line it up, and I'm gonna see about where I want it to go. And where I want that hook to come out is pretty much right before my pinchers there, okay? With the way I rig my jigs to get the most bites. So I'm gonna take that trailer, I'm gonna line it up, and I'm gonna say, okay, I want my hook to come out right above my pinchers. It doesn't affect the action, but I just don't want a ton of this trailer sticking out the back because it makes that jig way bigger. It makes it a lot more intimidating for smaller fish, you know. It's what most people who don't know what they're doing typically do. So those fish see it a lot. They've gotten burned by this profile so many times because a lot of guys who don't know what they're doing too, like we talked about in the beginning, are throwing on the wrong setup. So they've gotten hooked by that. It's got the same action as everybody else's jig that's learning jig fish. Oh my God, these sirens and semis. So, like I said, those fish have seen a full-size jig with a full-size trailer a bunch. Again, it's good for bigger fish, it's a bulkier profile, but if you're just trying to get bites, this is too much. They've seen it. It's got the same action as every jig that doesn't get trimmed and the trailer doesn't get trimmed, so don't do that. If you want to just build confidence and get bites, take this, bite off a chunk of that bait. So now all of a sudden it's substantially more compact, okay? What I'm gonna do is I'm going to thread that onto the back of my jig, okay? I'm gonna push that on, I'm gonna make sure it lines up super straight. And then that jig should pop out right how I want it there, to where that hook comes out right in front of those kickers, so that it makes it way harder for those fish to grab the back without getting hooked. Not saying they can't still do it, but it makes it way harder than having most of that trailer or a lot of that trailer off the back, because the more bait that is not that hook that's kicked off the back, the more the higher your odds are of them just grabbing the back and swimming off and you missing fish. So I typically don't like to have a lot hanging off the back. I want my hook pretty dang close to my kicking appendages, so that way when they come up and grab it, they just get it. Now, this is pretty dang big still. It is a very bulky profile. The jig skirt's full. Everything about this is big, okay? Trailer's fine. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pair of scissors, whatever kind you have. I'm going to take that brush guard and I'm going to fan this sucker out. So now it's very wide, and I'm going to cut about from the middle at a 45-degree angle towards the back, basically from the middle to the back of the top bristle. from the middle to the top of the back bristle there at a 45-degree angle up that brush guard, okay? So now what that's done is it's made that brush guard about half the size. It still works. It still is what it is, but you got rid of a lot of that excess at the top there that makes that jig bulkier, makes it more intimidating. There's just a lot of extra crap on there. And then the next thing you're gonna do, which typically I would do this without a trailer, but I goofed it up, so here's what we're gonna do. Take that skirt, let it all fall down below your trailer, okay? So now I've got jig skirt down here, trailer back here, and I'm just going to take and I'm gonna chop a lot of this jig skirt here. Not all of it, I'm just gonna chop it up. So now that jig is much more compact. My trailer is presented very well. There's nothing that's gonna get in the way and hinder that action. And I'm gonna get a ton more bites because of it. Because now I've got a very simple trailer. It's got a very good little kicking action. My jig's not huge and bulky. I've also got a bunch of different skirt lengths or skirt strand lengths on there. So every time that jig moves and hits the bottom, every single different length of skirt strand has a different motion to it. Now, if they're all the same, they all do the same slow, wide open. But if they're all at different lengths, the shorter ones move quicker, the longer ones move slower. And so now you've got varying levels of action happening. You've got the kicking on the back, and now you've also got different levels of motion on the skirt, which makes this look a lot more alive, makes it look a lot more natural. And every time you trim a jig skirt, it looks different than everyone else's because you trim yours one way, everyone else's trims theirs another way. And the sad fact of it is, a lot of guys don't trim their jig skirts at all. And so that's a very basic, the same action over and over again with a lot of newbies and guys that just don't like to trim them right. So every time I do this, it automatically separates my jig, makes it look a lot different. So when you're picking a trailer, make sure you bite it down, make sure it matches up to the back, find something that's simple. Find something that you like to Texas rig, you know, again, whether it's a freaking bandito bug, a rage craw, a greasy grub, a menace grub, whatever, right? Whatever you like to flip around, more often than not, will work on the back of a jig. Just make sure you line it up right. Another thing I like to do if I'm flipping some kind of beaver bait, I don't like all the appendages on the side, right? Like if you're throwing something that's got a bunch of kickers off the sides, take those off. The only thing you really need, the only thing that's super important on that jig is those back kickers there. So make sure whatever it is, whether it's a beaver style like this or some kind of kicking trailer, all you want is something really compact that matches up with that jig well. And if you get some confidence with it and flip it around and get some bites, then you can go and say, okay, they should be eating a jig. I've gotten bites on this before. And you can start to make those adjustments based on what your fish are doing. But just for this, like the sheer fact of getting bites and stop messing around with crazy stuff, find some kind of trailer that looks like this. Pop on over to Revive Bait Co. I'll link their bio below. This is a really good one. A lot of striking baits, whatever you want, right? Whatever you have confidence in, put it on the back, make sure it's not too big, and you're gonna catch more fish. Another thing, when it comes to trailer color, match it to the jig. If you wanna start off on a good note, don't do anything crazy, don't try and contrast. You can contrast, and that's fine. But just for the sheer sake of starting off and getting some confidence, if you're throwing a brown jig, throw a brown trailer or green pumpkin trailer. Green pumpkin will pretty much work on the back of everything. So try and stick to something more natural. If you're throwing a dark jig, throw a dark trailer. You guys will be just fine. Okay, boys, we are getting close to the end here. I appreciate you all watching so much. Once again, drop a comment with what you see, drop a comment with what questions you have. Make sure you like and subscribe. But the last thing we're gonna talk about is location and retrieval. One thing that I see talking to a lot of guys is that they go out, they have a jig, they've got the right setup, they've done everything right, okay? They've got a good trailer, they're doing whatever, but they just simply don't know where to fish a jig. They say, I can't get bit, I'm fishing all these places, I'm getting bit on other stuff, it's just not working, like, what is going on here? One thing that I'll say is you can catch jig fish pretty much anywhere you can catch any other fish on any other bait, okay? It's a very versatile bait. It's one of the most versatile baits in the entire arsenal of bass fishing lures, okay? Because I can fish it in 50 feet of water, I can fish it in 3 inches of water, I can catch fish on it anywhere in the water column, I can catch them on grass, wood, rock, docks, whatever it may be, they just bite, okay? But the one thing I think freaks a lot of guys out because they go fish a spot with a Ned rig, and they get bit on a Ned rig and then they throw a jig in there and they're like, well, it's not working. The one thing you have to kind of take into consideration is what size of fish am I catching in these spots where I'm fishing, and what cover is available, okay? A jig is going to be most effective around high percentage targets, okay? That's laydowns, that's riprap banks, that's big chunk rock, that's bridges, that's stumps, like you name it. Anything that looks really fishy, a jig is typically going to be effective around. Now, if you're going out and you're just bombing a jig out in the middle of your lake, you might catch some fish, but it might not be the best option, you know, as a search bait, because more often than not, you're gonna say, okay, I fished this for an hour dragging in the middle of nowhere, and there's just not a lot of fish out there, or the fish that are out there are small or whatever it may be. So if you're looking to build confidence quickly with a jig, start off in areas that are very high percentage and are target based, okay? Find bridges, drag around the bridges, fish the bridge pilings, flip docks, cast around docks, skip up underneath of them, do whatever, flip at stumps, cast around laydowns, okay? Flip grass edges and holes in the grass with it. The biggest thing is just finding areas like that, pitching that jig in there and working it really nice and slow, okay? I wouldn't just go out to your pond and cast out in the middle and, you know, they're gonna eat out there. I would find some of those targets on the bank and fish that way. If you're in a boat with live scope, fish the targets down there where there's fish. Let it sit, like flip it out to them, let it hit the bottom, watch those fish come down, don't move it. What a lot of guys do too is I see them doing absolutely too much with their jig, you know? I mean, there's a million different ways to fish it. Everyone's got their own unique style, but if you're just learning and you're just figuring out exactly how to do this, don't do too much, okay? A lot of guys want to shake it and hop it like crazy, and what you end up doing is that jig sometimes doesn't even hit the bottom before you start moving it, and you're trying to work it and make it look crazy. And the beauty of a jig is, just like a Ned rig or a shaky head or a lot of that stuff, sometimes the less you do with it, the better it works, because it just drives them nuts. The presence of it sitting there with that skirt material moving just drives them crazy, and they're gonna swim out and eat it. So don't overwork it. Find those high percentage areas, go down to the local dock or the boat ramp or the stretch of rock that you like to catch them on, or a grass line, or wherever you've been catching fish on other baits, and try and learn how to fish a jig around it. Don't work it too fast. Drag it on the bottom, hop it on the bottom, make sure you're maintaining bottom contact, make sure that bait's falling back down to the bottom, and just really pick your way through. If you're fishing around grass, or if the wind's blowing, try swimming it. You know, a jig that looks just like this with a little kicking trailer can also work as a really badass swim jig, you know, just straight reel it, hop it back, do whatever you want. If that's not working, pitch it, drag it, hop it, do whatever. But that's the beauty of it, is there's no really wrong way. It's just, don't do too much, okay? Fish it slow, take your time, fish it really easy. Cast at targets. A lot of guys I talk to are like, I'm not getting bit. When I ask them what they're fishing, they're like, I don't know, I'm just casting around. If you're just casting around with a jig and you do it for 20 or 30 minutes a day, you might not get bit, but if you go and you fish the highest percentage areas on your lake that have some woolly cover, fish shade on trees, you know, fish that nasty stuff that you haven't typically fished a bait, fish wherever you would fish a Texas rig, and you're just gonna get more bites. It's not that complicated, don't overcomplicate it. There's no magic art to it, okay? It's just spending the time to fish the jig in the high percentage areas where those bass live, okay? Don't do too much, make sure it's hitting the bottom between every time you move it. Give it a couple seconds to sit down there and see what happens, you know? The warmer the water is, the more aggressive you can typically be sometimes. And the colder it gets, the more you can take your time, you know, let it sit there for 20 seconds, hop it a little bit, drag it, do whatever you want, but just make sure that you're taking your time, you're fishing through some of those areas that you've gotten bit on other baits, because you know they're there. Take your time, and more often than not, you're gonna work out just fine. Some of my favorite places and the way that I really taught myself how to jig fish was fishing rock. Riprap, chunk rock, man-made rock, whatever it may be. Rock is an amazing place to build a lot of confidence with a jig, because everything that bass eat lives in rock. Shad, bluegill, green sunfish, crawdads, you name it, and a jig can mimic all of those things extremely well, especially around that stuff. So if you're looking to just go build some confidence before you go out and try and teach yourself how to grass fish with a jig, or how to flip docks, or how to do any of that, you know, go out to a section of rock, cast that little 1/4 ounce jig that we talked about, or a 3/8 ounce jig, cast it parallel to that rock, and start fishing the different depths of it real slow. Hop it up a couple times, let it fall back down. Hop it up, let it fall back down, drag it, swim it up shallow, do whatever you have to. But fishing around rock with a jig is a great way to build a lot of confidence and get a lot of bites, and some really damn big bites, you know. One of the biggest bass ever caught on one of our jigs was a 9-1 out of Kansas, and it was just fishing chunk rock with one of our little finesse jigs, you know, taking it really easy, dragging that jig off in the middle of the winter, and it catches giants, you know. So if you're looking to get a lot of bites and mimic that forage really well, just build some confidence, start with something like rock that's easy. You don't have to make very precise casts. You just kind of comb through, fish that area, and you're going to get bit with it. So that is our video, guys. I hope you guys took some stuff from that. The biggest thing with these baits is not overcomplicating it. Don't overthink it. This is not a tricky bait to catch fish on. You just got to go out there and spend the time with it, fish it in the areas you've caught other stuff, and really figure out what you like. But if you have the right setup, you fish the right jig that does it all on the right line, the right rod, the right reel, the right size. Try and stick to 1/4 or 3/8 if you guys are just learning. We can do a video on the heavier sizes later if you want to. You throw a trailer that will do pretty much everything on there, like a greasy grub or a menace grub or a rage craw there, something like that. And you work that bait in a way that is very thorough. You're not doing too much with it. You're not dragging the abyss, you know. Fish this around cover that has fish. You're gonna get bites, you're gonna catch a lot more fish, and you're just gonna have a much better experience with it, guys. So, like I said, if you have any questions, if there's anything I missed, please drop a comment below. I really like doing these videos because, again, I run my own jig company, and it doesn't help me at all to have a bunch of folks out there that don't know how to fish a jig. This is one of the absolute most fun ways to catch them. It's one of the best ways to break your PB, to catch a lot of fish, to cash a lot of checks in tournaments. And it just works everywhere all year round. So if you guys want to be better bass anglers, make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Load up on a couple of these jigs. We've got that sale going on right now. Check out the website. And we will see you guys in the next video, hopefully on Tuesday. But this has been Tackle Talk Wednesday. Thank you all so much, and we will see you guys next week.